She watched a woman get beaten in the street and chose to do nothing. She ignored a desperate friend begging for help and walked away. But when she arrived on a forgotten island, she discovered a nightmare hidden from the outside world. A place where one woman was treated like a slave, abused by everyone around her, and forced to watch her own daughter become a victim. And when nobody came to save her, she stopped asking for mercy. She picked up a weapon and turned the entire island into a place of revenge. Before we uncover how far one woman will go when pushed beyond her limit, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another shocking movie story like this. The movie opens in a desolate alleyway deep in the city. Hae-won sits inside her parked car when she notices two men brutally assaulting a young woman nearby. The victim eventually breaks free and stumbles through traffic covered in blood. Panicked and desperate, she bangs on car windows and begs strangers for help. When she spots Hae-won's open window, she rushes toward her car and pleads for help. Hae-won stays completely still. She rolls up the window and stares straight ahead while the woman continues screaming outside. The next morning, Hae-won returns to her job at a busy Seoul bank. A middle-aged woman sits across from her with shaking hands and pushes over a folder containing loan documents. She quietly explains her financial problems and asks for a short extension on her repayment schedule. Hae-won studies the numbers on her computer screen without once looking at the woman's face. A denial notice appears. She closes the folder, pushes it back, and tells the woman to seek a loan elsewhere. The woman explains that no bank will lend money to an elderly widow. She begins crying and pleads for understanding, explaining that she already moved into the house and needs the loan to maintain the mortgage payments. Hae-won remains unmoved and motions for her to leave. The argument draws attention from nearby employees, but nobody intervenes. Hae-won tells her coworker, Ji-soo, that she is stepping out in case the manager asks for her. Without acknowledging the woman again, she leaves her desk. While driving, Hae-won receives a phone call from her childhood friend, Bok-nam. Bok-nam asks why Hae-won never responds to her letters and asks her to visit Mudo sometime. Irritated by the conversation, Hae-won quickly ends the call. Later that day, police officers contact Hae-won and inform her that the assaulted woman died during the night. As the only witness, she is asked to identify the attackers. Reluctantly, she stands behind a one-way mirror and watches several suspects lined up for questioning. She claims she cannot clearly identify their faces and tells the officers to stop contacting her. Without a reliable witness statement, the police are forced to release the suspects. As Hae-won leaves the station, one of the men clocks her face. Moments later, the victim's father rushes toward her car, begging her to cooperate with the investigation before two officers pull him away. The gang members then approach and warn her not to show her face again. A police officer quickly intervenes and asks if she was just threatened. Hae-won denies it. Afterward, the intimidation escalates. Anonymous notes appear around her apartment, and she constantly feels like someone is following her through the city. Back at work, Hae-won discovers that Ji-soo approved the elderly woman's loan application against bank policy and confronts her with a warning. Later, someone locks her in the restroom. Convinced it was Ji-soo, she storms back into the office and slaps her in front of everyone, only to learn it was the janitor who accidentally locked her in. Her manager has had enough. He places her on mandatory leave. Hae-won decides to spend her leave in Mudo, the isolated, socially backward island where she spent part of her childhood. Before leaving, she collects a stack of unopened letters from Bok-nam she has ignored for years, using one envelope only to check the address of the boat terminal before setting the rest aside unread. Hours later, she arrives at the island. As soon as their boat docks, Bok-nam rushes toward Hae-won with overwhelming excitement. She hugs and lifts Hae-won off the ground with mixed emotions. However, Hae-won doesn't share her excitement and asks to be put down. The two walk through the village along a narrow dirt path while Bok-nam carries the luggage and talks excitedly. She introduces Hae-won to everyone as her friend from Seoul, but the villagers react coldly. Bok-nam's husband, Man-jong, spits on the ground and orders Bok-nam back to work. An elderly woman questions why Hae-won would spend her vacation on such an isolated island and warns her that the place is unsuitable for outsiders. Bok-nam takes Hae-won to the house where she now lives. Soon after, Boknam's 10-year-old daughter, Yeon-hee, quietly enters the room. Haewon tries speaking to her, but the girl runs away. Boknam explains that Yeon-hee is shy around strangers. When Haewon asks which grade she is in, Boknam admits that the child does not attend school at all. She explains that her husband and his aunt believe educating girls is pointless because they eventually leave home anyway. Boknam disagrees, but she has no authority in the household. That evening, Boknam's husband announces that he is taking Yeon-hee fishing. Boknam tries to object, but he silences her. Shortly after he leaves, his younger brother, Cheol-jong, enters the bedroom and forces himself on Boknam. Life on the island quickly reveals a brutal routine. The villagers constantly insult Boknam while forcing her to handle exhausting labor. Boknam admires Haewon deeply and treats her like someone who escaped a life she never could. She washes her clothes, prepares meals for her, and eagerly follows her around the village. One evening, the two bathe together in a pond while someone secretly watches them from a distance. The following day, Cheol-jong corners Haewon while she walks alone. She hides a sharp piece of glass behind her back. Before he can act, Yeon-hee suddenly appears nearby. Irritated by the interruption, Cheol-jong spits on the girl and walks away. When Haewon later escorts the girl home, she hears loud moaning coming from inside the house. Boknam stands outside while Manjong entertains a prostitute indoors. Furious over the humiliation, Yeon-hee tries to storm inside, but Boknam quickly pulls her away from the house. When Haewon asks what is happening, Boknam avoids the question and asks her to take Yeon-hee elsewhere. Back at Haewon's house, Haewon asks Boknam why she continues tolerating the abuse from her husband and the villagers. Boknam explains that life on the island has always worked this way. The men control everything, and the women endure it because they have nowhere else to go. She says nobody would shelter her if she tried leaving Manjong. Haewon tells her she is an adult and should be capable of surviving on her own. The following day, Boknam notices that Manjong has started buying makeup and revealing underwear for Yeon-hee. Alarmed, she confronts him. Manjong responds by violently beating her in front of the house until her face is covered in blood. Later, Haewon receives confirmation that her mandatory leave from the bank has officially become a termination. While packing her belongings, she hears a knock at the door and finds Boknam standing outside. Haewon thanks her for letting her stay and announces that she plans to leave on the next morning's boat. As she steps closer to hug her goodbye, she notices dried blood streaked across Boknam's face. Shocked, she asks what happened. Boknam claims it is not blood and changes the subject. She asks if she and Yeon-hee can leave the island with Haewon and move to Seoul. Haewon hesitates and says she needs to handle her own problems first before considering anything else. Desperate, Boknam reminds her of a promise she made years earlier. When that still fails, Boknam begs her to at least take Yeon-hee away from the island. Haewon senses that something is wrong and asks why she is so desperate to separate from her daughter. Boknam finally confesses that she believes Manjong has been taking advantage of Yeon-hee. She pleads with Haewon to save the child if she cannot save both of them. Haewon dismisses the accusation and assumes Boknam is inventing stories because she wants to escape the island. Devastated by the reaction, Boknam quietly leaves. The next morning, Haewon joins Yeon-hee near a rocky cliff overlooking the sea. The two share a warm embrace, but the moment quickly becomes unsettling when Yeon-hee starts touching Haewon's chest. Haewon remembers an earlier conversation where the girl said she wanted larger breasts because girls with big breasts receive more love. Disturbed, Haewon asks whether her father loves her and what he does to show affection. Before Yeon-hee can answer, her grandmother interrupts the conversation. She orders someone to drag the girl away, then kicks Yeon-hee's school books into the water. The elderly woman warns Haewon to stop interfering in matters that do not concern her. She tells her to leave the island on the next ferry, instead of believing Boknam's accusations. With no support from Haewon, Boknam secretly contacts Miran, Manjong's mistress on the mainland, and asks her to arrange a boat so they can escape the island. Miran arrives the following morning, but the plan collapses when the boat driver turns out to be one of Manjong's associates. Manjong drags Boknam back through the village and brutally beats her in public. The elderly women surround them and encourage him to break her legs so she can never escape again. Yeon-hee throws herself at her father and desperately pushes against him to stop the attack. Man-jong shoves her away with full force. She falls backward, strikes her head against a large rock, and dies instantly. Boknam collapses beside her daughter's body and desperately tries to wake her. Even then, she refuses to let Man-jong touch the child. The following morning, a police officer from the mainland arrives to investigate the death. 5 elderly women speak first, led by Yeon-hee's grandmother. Together, they claim the girl had been playing alone near the rocks before accidentally falling. The others repeat the same story, while Man-jong stands nearby pretending to mourn. The officer insists on gathering proper details before closing the case. Boknam remains silent and clutches Yeon-hee's photograph while struggling to process the loss. The grandmother uses that silence against her and suggests that Boknam would be screaming if someone else had killed the child. She even implies Boknam may be responsible herself. The women laugh openly while Boknam remains numbed. Suspicious of the rehearsed statements, the officer approaches Boknam and asks what happened. Boknam quietly tells him that Man-jong killed Yeon-hee. However, every other witness contradicts her account. When Hae-won enters the compound, the officer asks whether she saw the incident herself. Hae-won lies and claims she was asleep at the time. Boknam stares at her in disbelief, knowing she witnessed everything. With no evidence and no supporting testimony, the officer ruled the death accidental. Hae-won rushes toward the pier hoping to leave with him, but the boat departs before she arrives. The elderly woman then questions why she is suddenly eager to leave when her friend supposedly needs her most. Life on the island soon returns to normal for everyone except Boknam and Hae-won. Boknam withdraws into grief and spends her days mourning Yeon-hee. Hae-won becomes consumed by guilt over her silence. She failed to warn the police about the abuse on the island, and she ignored Boknam's desperate pleas to save the child. Several days later, Cheol-jong sneaks into Hae-won's room after drugging her food and attempts to rape her. Boknam walks in before he can assault her and drives him away with a burning piece of wood. While watching Hae-won sleep afterward, Boknam remembers a traumatic event from their childhood. Years earlier, she had been assaulted by Man-jong and several other boys, while Hae-won escaped and left her behind. The next day, Man-jong and Cheol-jong leave for the mainland to sell produce, leaving Boknam alone with the elderly women and one elderly man. Boknam spends hours harvesting potatoes beneath the scorching sun, while silently enduring her grief. Then suddenly, something inside her snaps. She picks up a sickle and walks toward the nearest woman and drives the blade through her neck. The remaining women panic and scatter across the village, but Boknam hunts them down one after another and kills them. Only the grandmother manages to escape before nightfall. The following morning, Boknam cuts the island's communication cable, severing all contact with the mainland. Meanwhile, Hae-won searches for a phone signal and accidentally discovers the terrified grandmother hiding nearby. The old woman claims Boknam has gone insane. Moments later, Boknam appears and knocks Hae-won unconscious before chasing after the fleeing grandmother. The elderly woman reaches the cliffs overlooking the sea and spots the men's boat returning in the distance. Believing the rocks below are close enough to land on, she leaps. Her poor eyesight betrays her. She misjudges the distance, crashes into the rock formation, and falls lifeless into the ocean. When the men finally return to the island, Cheol-jong washes his face beside a small pond. As Boknam approaches, he casually reaches out and grabs her body. In one swift motion, she swings the blood-covered sickle and decapitates him. Hae-won witnesses the killing from a distance and runs in terror to warn the others. Boknam then sneaks toward Man-jong and the boat driver, hoping to ambush them as well. Hae-won alerts the men before she can strike. Boknam still manages to wound the boat driver, but Man-jong eventually overpowers her, disarms her, and savagely beats her to the ground. Even while bleeding, Boknam warns him that she will expose everything he has done if he turns her over to the police. Man-jong remains completely unfazed. He tells her he will simply kill her and claim self-defense. Hae-won stands frozen in the corner as Man-jong continues beating Bok-nam. Then, for the first time, she intervenes. She warns him that she will report him to the police if he kills her. Man-jong turns toward Hae-won and tells her that once Bok-nam is dead, she will become his new wife on the island. Pinned to the ground, Bok-nam suddenly begins licking the knife in Man-jong's hand before running her tongue across his finger. Man-jong reacts with visible pleasure. Realizing she has distracted him, Bok-nam suddenly bites down hard on his finger and tears into it. Furious, Man-jong punches her repeatedly and reaches for an axe nearby, but the blade is lodged in a block of wood. Bok-nam seizes the opening. She grabs the knife with her mouth, drives it into his stomach, then snatches up her sickle and buries it into his chest over and over until he collapses dead. Terrified by the violence, Hae-won flees with the injured boat driver and rushes onto the boat. The driver struggles to start the engine while panic spreads across his face at the sight of the bloodied Bok-nam approaching the dock. Hae-won shoves him aside and finally starts the engine, only to realize the boat is still tied to the pier. The driver jumps off to untie it, but Bok-nam catches him before he can climb back aboard. The two struggle and fall into the water. Hae-won repeatedly pulls the starter cord until the engine fully catches. As the boat surges forward, the driver is dragged into the spinning propeller and killed. Bok-nam manages to swim free. The next morning, Bok-nam cleans herself up, dresses in Hae-won's clothes, and boards a boat to the mainland. When Hae-won reaches Seoul, police officers detain her as both a witness and a possible suspect in the island massacre. Meanwhile, Bok-nam arrives at the police station searching for her. When an officer attempts to stop her, she swings a sledgehammer into his body and leaves him unconscious. Hae-won later wakes inside a holding cell and finds Bok-nam standing nearby with the hammer. She escapes the first attack and runs for the exit, only to discover the doors locked and the officer collapsed on the floor. With nowhere left to run, she faces Bok-nam. Still handcuffed, Hae-won struggles to defend herself and eventually locks herself inside another cell. Bok-nam calmly searches the unconscious officer and finds another key. When Hae-won asks why she is doing this, Bok-nam tells her it is because she is mean and unkind. A sudden gunshot interrupts them. The wounded officer regains consciousness and fires at Bok-nam, injuring her. Even after being shot, she charges forward and drives the sledgehammer into his stomach, killing him. Bleeding heavily, Bok-nam enters Hae-won's cell and raises the hammer one final time. Before she can strike, Hae-won grabs the sharp mouthpiece of Yeonhee's flute and stabs it into Bok-nam's throat. Bok-nam collapses into Hae-won's arms and dies. Afterward, Hae-won finally tells the truth. She returns to the police station and identifies the men responsible for murdering the young woman she ignored in Seoul. Later, she retrieves Bok-nam's unopened letters from her apartment and reads them one by one. Each letter grows more desperate than the last, written by someone who keeps believing Hae-won will eventually come and save her. And that was the tragic story of Bedevilled, a reminder that ignoring someone's suffering can have devastating consequences. If you enjoyed this recap, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for more intense movie stories, shocking twists, and unforgettable endings. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.